Well, okay. Sorry about the background noise, but okay, um, let's begin. We reached the final lesson, right? Lesson 5, where already learned all about making an app, building the interface, using lists, making alarms, scheduling jobs, grading data, and well, that's all really amazing, right? We already know how to make a lot of basic apps, everything like that. So now for the final lesson, we'll be working on a little bit of uh, user engagement, how to grab the user attention and how to let the user interact a little bit also there instead of having to actually start our app and having to go to the the activity they want or the program they want via widgets. Widgets allow us to actually show a little bit of uh, a small piece of our application in the home screen. We can show different sizes or different actions to allow the user to interact with us, right? And the other thing is notifications, where we send small messages, reminders, or maybe some important information, right? Maybe like a game, we want to let the user know that they can play a game or that there is a big event coming on. They have to be prepared. Yeah. So that will be the topics of lesson 5. There's also a little bit on the Play Store and deploying. Um, we don't really go into much detail on those kind of things. So you guys should really read up on that. It's very important, but that's not our main focus. So let us begin with our presentation, right? And the presentation will be, sorry, it's not loading. There it is. About user engagement. And of course, as I said, user engagement is vital for our app. Via the user engagement, we know how the user is reacting, how important is our application, right? We can provide better experience, and therefore more users will be using our application, right? So with that in mind, here's what we'll be talking about. First, of course, we have to remember a very important thing that what we learned during all the course, right? And then there's notifications that, as I said, are small messages, right? Then we go to widgets, how to show the user important stuff, or maybe quick access stuff like handling a list, for example, or maybe showing information like the weather widgets that you see on the home screen, right, or the clock widgets. And then I'll talk about the solution for the lesson 5 exercise. So let's begin with a quick recap of what we have learned in the course, right? First of all, we learned how to design the UI. We saw that designing the UI is not as trivial as just putting edit text buttons and all the components in the screen, right? We have to take care about the margins, the colors, how they interact, what we want the user to focus on. In the case of the layouts, we learned there are many different layouts, and every layout actually handles differently. And because of that, there are rules. Well, rules more like guidelines to designing an UI, right? We saw material design a little bit later on the course. So that's a really good guideline of how to design an app, right? We saw that with the material design, we had really clear metrics, really clear examples of what to do and what not to do. We saw that we have colors, we have icons, we have accessibility features. There's really a lot of thought put into an UI, and that kind of thought is what we have to take into an app development, right? We can't just throw together all the components and expect the app to be a success, right? We have to make the app attractive because it's like the UI is the first thing that users will see. Of course, you can argue that the functionality is more important. Of course, if an app doesn't work, it doesn't matter if it looks good or not. But there are lots of apps, lots of developers, right? And if someone does something that looks better and works the same, they will get the audience, and we will not. So that's why it's very important to design the UI, to really put some effort on designing the UI, at least so it looks clean and it's simple. And then on the course we saw how to access all these resources that are packed with our application, right? Assets. We saw an example of how to read a JSON from the assets, and those assets are files that we want to include in our application: images, databases, videos, all that kind of stuff, right? Then, of course, there are the normal resources like or XML files or drawables or icons, and then there are our strings. And the strings resource is one that serves a lot of purposes, right? It works first as an UI component, right? So we store the strings in a file and then we call them on our UI. And then the string resources also works as a kind of help to localization process. And because of that, we have to take care of the string resources. Our coding text works, but it should be left only in test phases, right? In examples, not on applications that you are going to ship. You should always take care of those kind of warnings to make sure that your application is the best that it can be, right? Because then it's going to be a real pain to actually change the language. And if you offer more language options, then you can offer your application to bigger audiences, right? Okay, then moving on, we saw activities and fragments, how they communicate, how we can create an activity, how we can manage fragments, and use fragments as something reusable, right? And something that actually works with our UI that allows us to make, portions of UI, right? Like, of course, the best example is what is called a master detail flow. It's what you see on tablets when you switch from a phone to a tablet. That it shows instead. Think of an email application like Gmail or something, Outlook maybe. In a phone, your inbox, like well, it's a list of emails, of course, and then you click on something, and then it opens up another screen with the email content. We also saw this behavior on the movie manager, the app, I think, from the second lesson, where you have a list and then you show the detail. This kind of behavior shows on a single screen when you are using a tablet or a desktop, right? You see the list on probably the left side of the screen, and then the message is displayed on the right side of the screen. There is no real answer to saying you should use a fragment or you should use an activity. But when you are working with that kind of stuff, you should always think like try to group stuff by function, right? Mostly to keep yourself organized, right? You can do the exact same thing using only activities or using a single activity with like everything else on a fragment. You can do the same thing on both. But I actually like to split those kind of things by purpose, like having an activity and all its fragments do the same thing. And then that way you can have some sort of order, right? Instead of having a whole lot of fragments. And you should take care when working with fragments because of the certain things that they can't do. They can't communicate directly with another fragment. They can't, they don't keep the backstack. You have to handle that yourself. But they are more lightweight than activities, and you can avoid actually making different menus and everything like you have to do with activities. You can use a single menu with a lot of fragments. So there are upsides and downsides to both. Of course, then we saw permissions. And permissions, as you saw, if you looked up the list of permissions, there are a lot. Android asks permission for almost everything they do, like access the internet or changing the Wi-Fi state. They ask permission for that. Even by breaking the phone, you have to ask for a permission. Those are what we know as normal permissions. They are mostly they are simple things, right? Simple stuff that don't compromise mostly anything of the user, whether it be data or safety or anything like that. But then we also saw dangerous permissions. Those were the permissions that where we ask the user to write data, to know their location, and use the camera. Well, I think the camera is a normal permission, but whatever, the dangerous permissions, maybe the location, like if an application knows your location, it can be dangerous for the user, right? Because then they can show that location or do something like that. if an application can read your data, then you have well, access to everything, not just the data that your application is supposed to access, but access to the whole memory of the telephone. And that can be a little problematic. That's why the changes in permissions were implemented, where you have to actually inform the user of what you are trying to do with that permission. Of course, you can leave that as a simple pop-up, but it's better for the user to know what they are agreeing to, right? And then the next topic is threading. Threading is what we are mostly forced to do with big applications. Working everything on the main UI thread is going to be problematic, right? Sorry again for the background noise, but as I was saying, when you create an application, everything runs on the same thread, but that thread has more important topics to handle, right? The thread has to handle inputs, and well, there's a lot of things that the main UI thread has to handle, connections and everything. Mostly, if you don't tell your application to do something on a separate thread, they do everything on one single thread. And that can be a problem if you're trying to, for example, render a video or download big files, even connections, right, to the internet, where you're trying to download something, maybe stream a video. All those kind of things that take a lot of, well, of processing, they shouldn't be done on the main thread, because the main thread is not made for that. It can handle small things, writing text to the screen, handling, like if you click a button and you want to save that data that you have written, it can also do that. But when you're trying to do more heavy stuff, larger stuff, you have to use a thread. And we saw how to use an async task and how to move stuff, right? Instead of working on the UI thread, we saw how to use another thread to work. Hence, why they're called worker threads. Handler threads are also good things to do. You can dump a lot of work into a handler thread, and it will work just fine. Of course, take care of zombie threads, right? Threads that are working but no longer have a valid reference. Those take a lot of space, and they really don't actually do anything for us. They're just taking memory. Scheduling, alarm manager that is still being used. It was from the first version of Android. So we can throw an alarm where our application actually executes some code at a later time. Android tried to actually move out of using alarm manager for job scheduler, mostly for performance and battery drain, to things that job scheduler can handle very well. Now then, data. We saw how to write files. If you knew Java, you know how to write files in Android, right? Just be sure to ask for the permission if you're trying to write the data to the memory, right? Instead of your application sandbox. We saw that every application comes with an SQLite database to store your data. You can access that anytime. We saw how to read and write from that database via the content providers, or how can we create our own manager via the AO, or we can actually just send queries. And finally, on storing data, we saw the shared preferences store simple key value pairs that are good for, well, as the name say, to store preferences. Okay, now, those are some really important things that we learn. But now, let's move to notifications. Notifications are part, along with widgets, are part of the user engagement section. This is how we actually want to interact with our users. How to grab the user attention, how to send important messages to the user, instead of actually having the user to start our application and browse to where the information is. We can send a notification. And there are ways we can actually abuse notifications, right? Sending lots of notifications to the user to get them to maybe open our app or rate our app, spend more time in our application. And that's not what notifications are for. They have to be relevant to the user interest. And we don't want to send everything to everyone. So one of the changes that was made in the latest version Android O is that they split notification into channels, and the user can select if they want to receive or not notifications of a certain topic. We have to let the users to be aware they can stop receiving notifications, or if they want to start receiving them, right? Like, I'm sure you guys use YouTube, and in YouTube you can select if you want to receive notifications about a certain. Then in the same application, when you receive a notification, you can actually change the settings, and that's kind of an opt-out behavior. When you receive the notification, you can see that you can actually select to stop receiving notification, right? Well, let's talk a little bit about different types of notifications. The regular one, the simple one, is just to send a message, right? Like maybe a small message, a reminder, or something like that. But there are actually a lot of different types of notifications that we can send more detailed information. We can send like an email app that groups. When you receive a single notification from an email app, it's an email, right? You saw the email, the text, and a description, but then you start receiving more. And instead of showing every single email, you start receiving them in a single notification with a list. That's an inbox type notification. And like that one, there are a lot of different types. So we can pick the best one for the type of notification that we want to send. First, there's the BigTextStyle. Like you can probably guess from the name, it's a notification made to send a big amount of text. These kind of notifications can also be expanded. When you receive them, you may see there's just a little message, but then you can expand them and show a whole paragraph, maybe detailing important events or important stuff that you want the user to be aware of. This can be useful when sending important messages like an event that the user wants to know about, right? Where you have to be really detailed about your description, and where the normal notification doesn't really work, right? You can go into a lot of detail using this. And this is how you create them. It works very similar to a standard notification, but important part, second to last line, the set style option is where you change the style of a notification. You can set different options for every single style, but in this one, I just set big text style, and then you send a big text, where you just send a very long string. Next is the big picture style, where you display pictures. You probably have received this type of notifications before, where you see again, this one can be expanded. So you receive them as a small notification, and then when you expand them, there's a big picture. Well, messaging apps normally use this kind of notification when you send an image. Maybe you took a photo and you send that photo to another user. Then that user will receive a notification if they are not currently in the app. That notification will usually contain a preview, well, in case of very large ones, right? Smaller pictures show the whole picture, right? Then you can use that maybe to send a promotion or a flyer or something. Of course, be careful when doing this. We don't want to bother the user too much. Maybe if they have selected that they want to receive this kind of information, or they are relevant to the interests, right? Maybe you are selling tickets and you want to send a flyer to a concert, and you see that this user like this kind of music, so you send them the flyer. You can do that, but be careful, right? This is built almost the same way, right? As a BigTextStyle, just instead in the style you set a BigPictureStyle notification, and you send in this case I sent a bitmap. Then the inbox style, where messaging applications use this a lot. Email applications, a lot of applications where you have to actually stack messages, right? They show important items in a sort of a list. Instead of sending a notification for every single item, you send a big one containing an overview, right? And this style is used a lot because otherwise, when you see the notification drawer, you will see that one app sends you 20 notifications. You don't want that. Users don't want to see that an app send them so many notifications, except if they are really important events and they are equally important as one another, and you can't group them, right? Like on YouTube, you have set your preferences to receive notifications when there's a stream going on or there's a new video. they'll send you a notification for every single one of them. And of course, here's how to build an inbox style notification. The style now is the inbox style, and then you go adding lines, and then you add a title and a summary. In this case, summary is just like you have more messages, right? Finally, an ongoing notification is something that you can't dismiss, like when you receive an inbox, a message, right? You missed a call and then left a message. Postmail is use this kind of notifications to let you know that you have important information. The music player uses this to because it has some controls, and with that you can actually use the music player outside the application. And then a download manager, you will use this to keep you informed of how the download is going, right? This kind of notifications are used when you want to keep the user informed, when you want the user to know what's going on, and it's important information, so you don't want them to swipe away the notification, right? Because it's really important. You just use the set ongoing, then you set that to true when you're creating a notification. And be careful with it, right? You always have to be careful to pick the best type that you want to use. And something that you don't want to do, right? They are meant to grab the user attention, right? But we don't have to abuse them, sending too many messages, right? If the user is constantly dismissing your messages, they are maybe not interested in receiving so many of them. Or maybe for every single thing that is being updated, you send a notification. We also don't want to do that. Letting the users select frequency or select what they want to receive is a very good approach. That's what they were trying to do with the notification channels. And the other thing that you really don't want to do is sending stuff that doesn't interest the user. Sending messages like, oh, hello, welcome back, or happy birthday, or please rate our app, right? If don't include ads to another application, that's forbidden by Google policy. When you're uploading to the Play Store, right? It's not allowed, so don't do that. Now that we talk some about notifications, let's talk about widgets. And widgets, as we saw, are simple interfaces, simple pieces of our application, right? Mostly widgets show a simple view of what our application already does. Like use a weather application, a widget will just show you maybe a temperature and the time of day or something, maybe a forecast of the following days, maybe if it's clear, if it's raining. Then an email app, if it has a widget, it'll most likely show you the inbox, so you can browse your emails and stuff like that. A to-do list application, then most likely will have a widget, and that widget will show you the lists that you have created, right? And that's what their purpose is, to allow the user to interact with their application. Again, this is the other side of user interaction, user engagement. So how do you interact with a widget? You only can use gestures, very simple ones, touch and vertical scroll, right? That's because if they're in the home screen, the horizontal scroll is reserved to the phone so they can change pages like in the home screen, right? Most widgets support the touch command to open the application, like, like how we use in the exercise. We set them. Well, no, it was the example. Sorry. We set a button. We set that the same way, and we create an intent to open an activity. This is done so they can access the larger side of the application, right? Instead of having the reduced view, they can touch your widget. Most widgets do this by using a logo. Collection widgets, like the inbox of an email app or a to-do list, they generally allow you to manage the collections that you're working on, right? You select some item and you can edit, delete, stuff like that. From an email, you can most likely reply to the email. It will take you to the detailed view of the email, the content, and you can reply. And as I said, they are most likely the main function of our application. Sometimes maybe it's a secondary function that is really useful, and you want to show it outside because they may find it useful. Then, widget sizes. We don't want our widget to be too small. Maybe think of a collection widget. If it's too small, it won't be able to show anything. But if we're using a simple widget, we don't want it to be too large because it will take a lot of screen space to do really nothing with it. And one really important thing is that for compatibility with smaller devices, when you're creating a widget, it shouldn't be larger than a 4x4 size, right? In columns and rows, because that's the lowest size of screens, right? That they can support. So you don't want to do that because small phones won't be able to use the widget. We don't want to send like a lot of information because the widget will be too cluttered and it will be hard to understand, right? Mostly widgets show one simple thing, one action. Instead of saying if they want to use the whole application, they have to start the application. Widgets are meant to be simple. One thing you can do is create actually lots of widgets. Right? You just create how you create a widget. You create your provider, your receiver, and then you create a widget. You can create a lot of them and let the user pick the one that they want. But you can also resize a widget. I'll be showing in a little bit. So when do you resize a widget? Collection widgets, like a gallery, maybe. Can be resized to show more items, right? If it's displayed in a grid, you can resize it to show 3, 4, whatever. Other widgets resize to show more information, like this example right here, the weather app. When you're changing the size, you change what you are displaying, right? And you show more and more information. So how do you go about doing a resizable widget? First, on the metadata, you have to allow the widget to be resized. It's called resize mode, and it can be vertical or horizontal. I'll leave a little example on the description, so you can check that out. And this was introduced in the API level 16, API 16. So if you're targeting something lower than that, be sure to make an annotation that you're using this API, right? And resizing is done on the on-app widget options change. It's a method, a function of the widget that handles when the size of the widget has changed. There's a lot of documentation, right, on the developer side, and so for now, just know that this is where you want to handle your resizing. But how do you do that, right? This is, of course, you can see the more detailed example. I use the example widget where we show a random name on the screen, and I just added resizing options to that. So one way that it works, because we sometimes on update is also called, right? So you have to, and if you declare, well, sorry, let me start. Yeah, the way we do that in the example, on update, we set the layout and we set the options, right? And then what if our widget has changed? And in this case, like I'm using the same widget where we actually are updating that thing, right? If the widget has changed, but everything about the thing is defined on the onUpdate method, onUpdate will be called, right, when we are updating the widget information. And the thing is, this can cause problems because if something is declared on one and then is declared on the other function, and then you are switching between those two, that may lead to problems, right? Crashes, the application not working correctly. So one way to handle this, especially if you're reusing a lot of code, like in this example, is to actually create a separate function that handles everything. That is mostly the onUpdate function that we did, but it's called in both functions. And then that new function that is called what I call update widget receives all the parameters in case if it was resized, it receives also the new sizes, right? And then you place that logic of your application. First of all, of course, the remote views, this function gets remote views is another function I added. It just calculates the size in columns and rows, and you get the remote views, right? Remember, it's kind of like the layout you will be using. And then you, in the same update widget function, is where you actually handle all the configuration changes, everything that your application wants to do with the widget. Of course, I remember I'll leave that on the description. So just know that if you want to actually support resizing, there are two things. First, it was introduced in API 16, so don't target older devices than that. And then this is a good way to avoid problems when you are updating your widget. You make a separate function and you call that passing the parameters. On update, you will be sending the current parameters, and then on app widget options changed, you will be passing the new parameters, but they'll be doing the same thing. And so, with that, you will get this kind of behavior, right? In this example, I just changed the layout they are using. When it's using a single row, you see the layout horizontally, and then when it's a bigger layout, maybe 2 or 3 or more, you see that in a vertical layout. It's really simple, right? But you can actually use that to do a lot of things with widgets, or you can declare different widgets with the same kind of thing, right? You could have declared another widget that had the vertical type of layout like this. Okay, then moving on to the lesson 5 exercise, it was about creating a list widget, right? Before that, know that the course is mostly over. Be sure to check your exercises and your quizzes because it's going to close soon, and you do want to get I think it was 70 or 75% to get your certificate, right? So be sure to check how you're doing, or you can ask questions, review the material, right? Leave us your opinions on what we're doing. And the other thing was that we also talk a little bit about deployment, about the Play Store. I don't really want to get too much into that, but you know that there are a lot of resources when it comes to the Play Store. There was a conference of Google I/O where they explained that you can use the console to handle when your app crashes, when it's going slow, and you can receive all those kind of informations with the console. Do be careful, right? If you want to use the console, remember you have to pay. It was like $20, I think. Remember that, right? Then there are the guidelines, like you have to make sure your app meets certain standards. So there are a lot of those kind of things. So read them and be sure to check them out. Okay, so moving to the exercise, it was creating a widget that displays a list. The first thing is that you have to read about a remote views factory. This, in the context of widgets, a remote views factory works the same as an adapter. It's not the same, it's not defined the same way, but it works the same way for now. And there are 3 methods that you want to take care about. Well, there are only 2, right? On dataset change and the get view. Mostly, this works as an adapter. So this is where you set your data on dataset change. You set what you're working with, and get view app. You say you get a particular object at a position, right? Like with the recycler view on the movie manager, where you select the one and then you get the details of that particular movie. That's the same way the remote views factory works. There's really not much to talk about this exercise because it's really simple once you get down to it. When you made a remote views factory, then you move to a remote view service. And the remote view service, mostly its only purpose is going to be, get the correct remote views factor. Remote views, right? Remember, a remote views is like a layout, And this is where we actually will be getting our layout, where we set or interactions, right? We link our layout with our methods and our functions, and this is where we make that link. It really doesn't have much more purpose than that. Of course, it do has some purpose, but this is the only thing we care about right now. Then we have a widget provider. Our widget provider, we made one in the widget example widget, and first with this we have to register the service, right? This remote view service. We have to register it on the manifest like any other service. Then you set your adapter. This one, the remote views factory. You set your adapter to the list, right? Because that's what we care about. You set the adapter to the this right here. Widget list view is the list inside the layout of the widget. You set your adapter, and then you call the app widget manager to update your widget. And that's really all there is to making a collection widget. It's really simple, and it doesn't take a lot of work to actually do that. That covers mostly everything. Well, it's the end of the course, so there's really not much more to talk about. Once you do the exercises, you will see that these ones are very simple. You shouldn't have any trouble with any of this content because it's, again, simple. It doesn't have a lot of thought or effort that you have to put in. You just have to be careful when working with the widgets and notifications. And well, this will be the final masterclass, right? The final time I'll be speaking to you guys like this. I know maybe the time isn't really the best for this kind of things, but I hope that you take something out of these videos. If you think videos should cover something else, like maybe you want to see an example or how to handle maybe an interaction with another, well, I don't know, right? But maybe you guys already have some ideas of an application that you want to start. And well, you could ask for something like that and let me know, and I'll try to make something, maybe a little example of what you guys are trying to make. So this will be everything. I hope you guys are close to getting your certificates. It's the very last stretch. Remember, the class closes at the 25th. So be sure to have everything done by that. Otherwise, you might not get your certificate, and we don't want that, right? So, well, thanks for taking the course, and I hope you guys learned something. So, take care.